We've been in a series for a little while now called Listen to This, and I said when I started this series, it's going to be about helping us understand and kind of rein in a positive way, the power of our words. Last time I spoke, I said this: we live in a time in which you can get in more trouble quicker with your words than any other time in the history of the world. Because now, it used to be that you had to say something really, really stupid in front of a lot of people before it could impact you negatively. Oh no. One tweet, one text, one email, or your words, because somebody's recording, can blow your whole life up. So I talked about this last time, and I'm telling you, almost every day there were new examples of what I said. Did you hear about this last week? One tweet. And here's the thing about words. Her show's canceled. Here's the thing about her words. Think about this. I've been talking about how your words impact your life. Her words took out other people's careers. For some of the people on that show, this was their first break. Some of them will never get another break. That's just the nature of Hollywood, right? Your words don't just impact your life. Your words can cost you your job and people around you their jobs. It can cost you your reputation. It can damage other people's reputations. Your words can destroy people's lives, right? That's why this topic is so serious. Your life and your future and your success in a large part depend upon how good you get at controlling this tiny little part of your body right here. I mean, it can affect everything, your relationships, everything. It's affecting you every day. And so the Bible, when it talks about words, it says, oh my goodness, it's like God is saying in the book of Proverbs, would you please just do this thing? Would you get wisdom? Would you get wiser with what you're saying? And so when I was planning this series months ago, I thought, all the things we could talk about, how to control gossip. We did that earlier on. And then I thought, as I was planning this series, I thought, I should talk about what the Bible has to say about being wise with your words, because it actually has a lot to say about this. And little did I know how big this would become in this series, because it begs us, get wisdom. Would you get smarter with what you're saying? And then it says this, and here's why. Because your tongue, it can bring death to people, or it can bring life to people. Now, that may seem like an overstatement. It's not. There was a report this last week of a teenage girl who killed herself because of the bullying she was enduring in her school. In that case, it was literal life and death. Gary Chapman is an author that I've read some of his stuff. He said this. He said, your words every day are either bullets or seeds. Every day, your words are either tearing through the people around you in a destructive way, or they're seeds that are causing the people around you to grow in healthy ways. Every day, your words are bullets or seeds. So if I were to ask you just to think about yesterday, just yesterday, and what you said to your spouse, or what you said to your kids, or what you said to your friends, or the people you were encountering, were there more bullets than seeds? Were there more seeds than bullets? I mean, this is such an important subject. So, I want to ask you to open up your program, take out your notes as we continue this one called How to Add Wisdom to Your Words. In your program are these notes. Would you grab them? For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. In the comments section below are these notes. Would you download them? And I want to ask for a little bit of grace today, because what I'm about to do rarely happens. And thank God it rarely happens. I do all this stuff to memorize my message and prep it. And this morning I woke up super early, couldn't get back to sleep. So I'm like, I'll just go through this. And in the process of going through it, my final time this morning, I ended up pretty much rewriting a whole chunk of this message today. Thank God that doesn't happen very often. But I felt like one aspect of what I was talking about needed to be the only aspect of what I was talking about. So on your notes, if you're looking at them, you see 3 points, which was the continuation of last week. Last time we did 1, 2, and 3, so this is 4, 5, and 6. Forget it. We're only doing 5. So for those of you like, how will I live? There are unfilled in blanks. The good news is I'm going to continue this for a third week. So I'll come back and give you those blanks, but not today. So I'm grateful this doesn't happen very often, but as I was doing this one more time, I just felt so prompted by God to make this the focus. So number 5 on your notes, speak with humility. Wise people who are very wise with their words learn how to add humility to what they say. Now, some of you are already starting to check out. You're like, really? Humility? Some of you do not understand how significant that word really is. Matter of fact, there was a teenage boy who wrote into one of these advice columnists, and he said this. He said, this last week, he said, after class was over, my teacher pulled me aside after this public presentation in the classroom and said that I need to start working on being more humble. This is what the teacher said to this high school boy. And so he wrote this advice columnist and said, honestly, I can't decide how ready I am to become more humble. Some of you relate to that sentence. I'm not really sure I'm ready to become more humble. And he said, this is why. He said, looking at the successful people I know, I see that the more they believe in themselves, the further they get in life. So if anything, I'd prefer to work on my self-confidence. Why humility? Imagine if I see myself as small, how small I will be in the eyes of others. I don't see the value of humility, so please share your thoughts on this. So is that what I'm saying? That we need to learn how to bring humility into our relationships by learning how to speak with words of humility? What I'm really saying is you need to be more small. Is that what I'm saying? You need to be a doormat? That is not at all what I'm saying. And that poor young man does not understand humility. There was a great book called Humilitas, which I read years ago, and the author gave the definition of humility this way. He said, it's the noble choice to redirect your power in service of others. You forgo your status, you deploy your resources, or use your influence for the good of others before yourself. So arrogance is about me for the sake of me. That's what arrogance is about. Hey, did you guys see me? Yeah, you should pay attention to me. Humility is not weakness, it's power, but I use that power to serve the people around me. If you look objectively at the world that we live in, the people who have reshaped the world, the Mother Teresas, they weren't doormats. They were powerful influencers who used their power to serve others, right? Mother Teresa's model for all of this is Jesus Christ. Jesus is the model of genuine humility. Was Jesus weak? No, he was God among us. Do you know the book of Colossians says that when Jesus was here on earth, the creator and sustainer of the universe was walking on this planet. He'd taken on a human body and come into this world. And then the night he was betrayed, he did one of the most unbelievable things. It blew his disciples' minds. He actually got down on his knees, put on a serving towel, got down on his knees, and he washed the feet of his disciples. Now again, this was at a time when they walked on dirty roads that were filled with animal waste. So did you know that if you were a slave in Israel, during the time of Jesus, there were slaves. Do you know that if you were an Israelite slave, they could not make you do this task because it was considered even below them? Only foreign slaves were required to do this. So, it is like the lowest of the lowest jobs. And Jesus stands up in front of his disciples, wraps a towel around him, gets down on his knees, he starts washing his feet. That's why if you've read the story, you know what Peter does? When Jesus gets to Peter, he's like, no, you are not washing my feet. And Jesus says, unless you let me do this, you have no part in me. And then he stands up and he says to his disciples, what you've seen me do now, you do for others. That's not weakness. That's incredible power serving others. That's what humility is. Now, and unfortunately for that kid, he doesn't understand how powerful humility actually is. One of my favorite authors is a secular business author named Jim Collins. Jim Collins researches the best of the best in terms of businesses in our society. So there are businesses that, they spike for a while and then they collapse and they're gone. And then there are companies that become enduringly great. He studies the enduringly great ones. When he was doing his research, and he and his team were researching what makes a company in America the best of the best, one of the things that he discovered was there was an aspect of all the leaders, every one of them, that built enduringly great companies that surprised the business world. The X factor of great leadership is not personality, it's humility. It's humility. Now, that was stunning when I read that in the book. Are you kidding me? This is not a Christian. He is a secular business writer saying, if you want to be the best of the best, I mean the premier leader in America, you have to choose humility. See, that poor young boy's got it all wrong. Humility isn't the path to failure, it's the path to the greatest success you can experience in life. And it's so important when it comes to talking with our words and using our words. So you've got to begin with humility. So much more I'd love to say about this. It's one of my favorite subjects, and I'll explain why later in the message. But let me get into actually how to speak and use our words with humility. The first thing is, oh, by the way, stop thinking you're wise. This is where it all begins, right? Because your mouth is simply going to say what's in your head. So if you think you're all that and a bag of chips, that's coming out of your mouth. You got to change the way you think about yourself. So Proverbs 26:12 says, there's more hope for fools than for people who think they're wise. Do you know how strange that verse is? If you've ever read the book of Proverbs, it's just a book filled with little quotes like this. Wisdom literature, we call it. All of these quotes about what wise people do. And then at the bottom of the rung of life are fools. And he describes what fools' behavior is like, how they think. And then he goes, in this verse, he says, oh, by the way, there's a group below fools. There's more hope for a fool than for someone who thinks they've already arrived. Well, you are really in trouble if you think you've already arrived. Now, here's the problem with this. I bet none of you think that you're wise. Maybe you think that you're kind of wise in one area of your life. But I doubt if I'm speaking to too many people who are like, yeah, I'm really wise. I mean, isn't that a kind of an arrogant thing to say? Some of you are like, I'd never say that, so this isn't for me. Okay, well, hold that thought. One of the things that I do in my own spiritual life, because I take this very seriously, this topic of humility, is I have a section in my prayer notebook that's just my humility section. And what I do is I have collected things that God has taught me over the years that are designed to remind me not to be proud. Because pride's been an issue in my life all the way back. I was proud when I had nothing to be proud of. I've been arrogant since I was a young man, and so I really take this seriously. And in that section of my prayer notebook, I have truths that God has taught me that I constantly say to myself in my prayers to God to remind me of what I'm teaching here today. Here are two of them. I didn't write them down in your notes. You can if you want to. Truth number one is there's so much I don't know. So much I don't know. You know, I read a lot. If you read a lot, one of the things that happens when you read a lot is you quickly learn how much you know nothing. I can't tell you how many times I've picked up a book on a subject that I thought I knew something about, and I read it, and by the end of it, I'm like, I know nothing. It's one of the reasons why I love reading great books is because I'm like, I wonder what's in here that I'm about to learn that I never knew before. I wonder what I'm about to learn about life or relationships or conflict. It's like books are treasures. That's why the Bible says, you got to pursue knowledge. And one of the outcomes of the genuine, humble pursuit of knowledge is that you really begin to get to the point where you realize, I know nothing. I just know absolutely nothing. And so you see that in a quote even from people way back, as far as Socrates, the man who's truly wise knows that he knows very little. So here's my question. How comfortable is it for you to say, there's so much I don't know? Now the problem is, when you know something about one area is we do projection. Some of you, I know a lot about public speaking. I've been a public speaker for 26 years. But the reality is, there are books that have been written by better public speakers, and if I got that one book, I would learn so much more and I would become more effective. The problem is, when we get really good in some area of our life, we tend to project it onto other areas. That's not true. The reality is, there's so much that we don't know in so many areas of our lives. So how comfortable are you saying this internally? Okay, there's a lot I don't know. Because you're not going to speak with humility unless you start thinking with humility. How comfortable are you saying that? So much I don't know. And then the second truth that's not on your notes is I'm wrong a lot. How comfortable, some of you are like, I'm not even writing that, let alone saying it or thinking it. It'd be great practice for those of you married. Turn to each other right now and say, honey, I'm wrong a lot. Okay, some of you would be like, well, then we'd have to get the defib machine out and start zapping people back because they wouldn't know how to handle that. It's like, yeah, that's hard to say. For many, many, many people in life, they can't say it. I'm going to quote a lot from an author named Dale Carnegie. Have you heard me talk about this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? It's one of the best books I've ever, it's constant reading in my life. I read it over and over again. So much I've learned from him. Dale Carnegie once said this: if you can be sure of being right only 55% of the time, you can go down to Wall Street and make $1 million a day. So if you can't be sure of being right even 55% of the time, why are you telling people they're wrong? Right? It's just what Jesus said. He said, Christians, especially, we need this verse constantly in American Christianity. We're running around trying to pull the splinters out of people's eyes when we have a plank in our own. Those are the words of Jesus. He's like, would you get your focus off everybody else's screw-ups? Because you're screwed up. And you got enough to focus on here that you don't need to be focused on out there. And I love that first sentence. Do you realize he's right? If you're so smart, quit your job and go to Vegas. Because you only have to be right 55% of the time. You'll be a millionaire in no time, right? So how many of you are quitting your jobs and going to Vegas? Oh, please don't do that. Because we're not right even, we're not right as often as we think we are. So these are the truths you have to internalize. There's so much I don't know and I'm just wrong a lot. Now, I've been saying these to myself in my time with God for years and years and years. I can say them very comfortably. I can say them with a smile on my face. I couldn't always do that. But this is where you have to get to. You have to get to the point where you're very comfortable saying these humbling truths about you. By the way, everybody else knows this about you. Everybody. You may not know it about yourself, but we all do. We all know it. So you got to get to the point where you're just comfortable. Okay, this is true about me. There's a lot I don't know, and I'm wrong a lot. Now, out of that will flow the humble words that are going to change your life and allow you to have more influence in this world. Once you got that here, it'll come out here, and this is where you'll begin to have a greater impact in this world. So now we can go on to letter B on your notes. So now, a humble person is willing then to ask for feedback and help. You know why? Because they're wrong a lot, and there's a lot they don't know. So now these words of humility flow naturally from what you think. You ever been around somebody who never asked for help and never needed feedback because they just pretty much knew everything? Isn't that a lot of fun? Have you ever worked with somebody who knew everything about everything? Am I the only one? I have worked with people like that. Well, I was one of those people. But then, let's get past that. So, eventually then I knew that I didn't know those things. But then I had to work with people. God has a sense of humor. And boy, years and years ago in the church world, I hired somebody who knew everything. I got to the point where it was like, if you wanted to bring up a topic, all you could pray was, please let this person agree with me. Otherwise, it was fight about everything, because they just knew everything, and they were just so confident they knew everything, and there was no way but their way. And the Bible has a word for those people. Fools. Fools think their own way is right. And actually, it should be like always right. Isn't that true? But the wise are willing to listen to others. So this is what foolish people do. Foolish people don't speak with humility. They're not willing to say, you know what, I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. Instead, they think they know. And they don't seek help from others, and they don't seek input from others. In 26 years of being a pastor, however long I was a pastor, there were many, many times when I would be talking to people, and they'd be in the middle of some horrible crisis, and their world would be falling apart, and I would say to them what you would expect. Part of what I would say is, I think it's time you go see a counselor. I think it's time to sit down and talk to somebody about what's going on in your life. I cannot tell you how few people who desperately needed help wouldn't go get help. Matter of fact, one of the common things I would get is pushback. I don't need a counselor. And when you could get honesty from them about why they didn't, I actually had one person say to me, I don't want people to think there's something wrong with me. Let me clear this up for all of you today. There's something wrong with you. All of you, no exceptions. You two on the team, me too. There's nobody that there isn't something wrong with. There's something wrong with you. I've quoted this quote for many, many times, for many, many years from one of my favorite authors, Dr. Henry Cloud. There are only two kinds of people in this world: dysfunctional people and seriously dysfunctional people. That's it. That's all there are. There's nothing else. You are in one of those two camps, and those of you who are pushing back mentally, you're like, oh, I can't believe you just called me dysfunctional. And you're like, I'm not dysfunctional. Guess which group you're in then? You're at the top rung of the ladder of the seriously dysfunctional ones. That's where you are, and you don't know it, but we all do, because we got to interact with you. There's only two groups. You're in one of them. You're either dysfunctional or seriously dysfunctional. So something's wrong with you, of course. So you got to get to the point where you're comfortable enough with humility to be able to say, yeah, something's wrong with me. Because if you can't get to that, you're never going to get better. Never. You will remain stuck in the pain and the problems that have haunted you all your life. Your future depends on you getting to the point where you can humbly say, I need some help. I need help. There's something wrong with me. It's got to get to that point. So a couple of questions. Here's what I want you to think about today. Where are things not going right in your life? Where are things not going right in your life? And then some of you are like, yeah, I got a list of things where things aren't going right in my life. Well, then here's the follow-up. Who have you talked to? Who are you getting help from? Some of you got the first question nailed and the second one, nothing. Humility, this powerful force in your life, will come when you're able to say, this isn't right and I need some help with this. And it may sound like this: can we talk? I need some help. Or can you help me with a decision I'm making? Some of you, that's what you need, because you're making a big decision right now and you need some wisdom. And you need the humility to say to people around you who are wiser than you, hey, can you help me with this? I don't know the answer to this. Can you give me some feedback on a decision I just made? Some of you have never asked for feedback on any decision you've ever made. That's curious to me. And then the last one, I don't know how to. There's such humility in those last words. I don't know how to heal from this. Some of you, those are the words you need to say to somebody. I don't know how to get over this. I don't know how to deal with this addiction in my life. I don't know how to break free from this. And it's in those powerful words of humility that your whole life is going to change. If you can speak with humility, your life will change. Because the power in this world comes when we speak with humility, not arrogance. So that's the second thing we do. We add humility to our words by not thinking of ourselves as arrived, by asking for feedback and help when we need it. Third, by showing humility during setbacks and failures. Ever have any? Ever make a mistake? Have any setbacks, failures? What you say during those times really, really is important for your future. Years ago, when I was a young pastor, this woman and her fiance came in to see me. They wanted me to do their wedding, and so I have, a requirement of premarital counseling for most situations, and so I started doing the premarital counseling for this couple. She was in her mid-20s. It was her second marriage in her mid-20s. So that was a little surprising, and so we started talking about that. And in the course of the dialogue, I said to the couple, well, we all know that no divorce is ever 100% anyone's fault, right? Takes two. She said, that's not true. My divorce was 100% his fault. I'm like, I don't really know where to go with that. I was so stunned. I'm like, 100%? You had no fault in your divorce? Nope. So it set off a lot of red flags, but I was so young I didn't know what to do with that. And so I finished the counseling, did the ceremony, and 1 year later, they were divorced. I'm sure it was all his fault. That's the only thing I'm sure of, right? Unbelievable, right? But that's the world we live in. There are people like this. And here's the thing you need to understand. You know why her marriage failed? Do you know why she's going to fail in every romantic relationship she ever goes into to build anything healthy and loving and intimate? Do you know why it probably spread into other areas of her life? Don't know, don't remember. But her career or her other relationships, it's because this. Proverbs says a man or woman who refuses to admit their mistakes can never be Never be. She will never be successful. Because when there's a failure and when there's a setback, she can't sit back and go objectively, well, here's what I own from this. Here's what I did wrong. So she will never be successful without the ability to speak those humbling words. I did it. This was me, all me, I own it. Now, all of us have been in time, and maybe right now as you're sitting here, all of us have been in relationships at some point where we've been with people who could not admit it. Are the people that come to mind from your past? Some of you, your parents, your mom or dad were never wrong. Some of you never, ever, ever in your life heard your mom or dad ever say they're sorry. It never happened. So it's easy for us to focus on other people and to say, well, how about those times when nobody did this to me? That's not what this message is about. You have to consider, is there humility in the way that I handle my mistakes? Are the humble words coming out of my mouth that I need to be saying? So on the back of your notes are this really cool resource. I'm not going to have you read through this right now. It's way too much. This is from a book called How to Solve Your People Problems by Dr. Alan Godwin. It's one of my favorite books. So you can read through that later. But I've got a little summary up on the screen here, and I want you to look up here. You can read that later. Here's what I want you to understand. He said, there are reasonable people in this world and unreasonable, right? There are unreasonable people in this world. You know why they're unreasonable, he said, is because they lack certain muscles internally. The very first muscle he points out is what he calls the humility muscle. By the way, everything in a healthy relationship flows from this one muscle. If you don't have this one, nothing else positive is going to happen in this relationship, especially when there's mistakes or conflict or problems. The humility muscle allows you to sit back and go, I may be wrong and you may be right. Now, do you understand why that we started with? You got to change the way you think. You have to understand that you are wrong a lot. You cannot quit your job and go to Vegas and make a living. You're not going to be right 55% of the time. You're not going to be right even close to that. So you got to internalize, yep, I'm wrong a lot. Otherwise, you can't say this. I may be wrong, you may be right. Now, if you can't say this when a problem comes up in your marriage or in your parenting, as parents, you will make mistakes, right? Or grandparenting or in work relationships. You make mistakes at work, everybody does. So if you can't say this, you'll never do the next one. You'll never start to gain self-awareness. The awareness muscle, it flows from humility. It allows you to see where your errors are, your blind spots, and see where you've been wrong, because you've been wrong. If you don't understand this, you have blind spots right now. Things that are messing up your life and messing up your spirituality and messing up your relationship with your friends and family and people that you love, and you don't even know what they are. Everybody has them. Everybody. I continue to be amazed by how many blind spots I discover. I'm almost 48 years old, and it's become clear to me that the rest of my life will be a process of discovering where I'm screwed up. That's just the reality. I can accept that. Because I work so hard on those humility muscles, and I'm so proud of that. A few of you got it. That was supposed to be funny. It flows naturally into when there's a problem, I own this, and I can back up and say, is this indicative of something bigger in my life? Is this part of something else? Is there a pattern in my life? Is there something I need to be aware of? So if you don't have that humility muscle, you can't have the awareness muscle. And if you don't have the awareness muscle, you're never going to have the responsibility muscle, which allows you to be bothered by the pain you're causing others, so you change. You don't blame others, you change. Have you ever had an apology from someone that you couldn't stand their apologies from? You're like, I don't want another apology from you. Because you knew their apologies didn't mean anything. They weren't going to change. This is why. This was missing in their life. They didn't have the humility to say, I may be wrong, you may be right. Oh yeah, I get it. Look at what I'm doing wrong. I own this, and here's how I'm going to change. Do you see how these all flow together? Without that foundational humility muscle, people don't change. That's why you have to get to the point where you can say, I'm wrong. I own this. And you can say it. You know, I'm not saying that you can always say it without discomfort. There are times that it's very uncomfortable for me to say that. It's like, yeah, I'm wrong. But you can get to the point where you know that you simply have to do it because no positive change is going to come without the ability to show humility during those times of failure, those times of mistakes. So the question is, I got a few questions for you in this one. When was the last time you said you were wrong and you apologized? Now, if nothing comes to mind recently, do you live in a cave alone? Do you not work with people, humans? Do you not live in the same house with humans? Or you're just perfect? Or you're not owning what you need to own? Any of those are possibilities. What was the last blind spot you became aware of? Can you think of it? The last aha moment you had where it's like, oh, drat, I own this, this is me. There's something in here. What was the last blind spot you became aware of? By the way, if you can't think of some, do you realize how scary that is? You got them. You got them. And if you're not becoming aware of what they are, they're affecting you. What are you working on right now in your life that you know you need to change? Because if you got nothing there again, it must be nice to be perfect. I know there are things in my life that I'm working on that I want to get better on. And all of this, this ability to speak humility that has such a powerful impact in the people's lives around us, in our own life, it all comes from these things. We first change the way we think. I'm wrong a lot, and there's a lot I don't know. And then we can own our mistakes when we've made them. Yep, I own this. Oh yeah, this is part of something bigger, I got to deal with this. And here are the steps I'm going to take to deal with this. How comfortable are you saying those words of humility? All right, one last one. Have conversations, not arguments. Humble people speak words they have conversations. Their words are about conversations they don't get in a lot of arguments. Proud people get in a lot of arguments. Pride and arguing go hand in hand. And some of you, okay, for those of you who are married or dating someone, I want you to think in your head, and don't react, just think in your head. Who's the better arguer among the two of you? Yeah, you can't help but react, can you? It's like, yeah. Some of you are like, oh, it's not even fair. She's so much better as an arguer than I am. He's so much better an arguer than I am. For those of you who are the better arguer, you have a very big responsibility in the eyes of God. Because you can argue and win and be wrong, and you know it. You know it. And then what you do is you really cause damage. Because then it's about your pride and ego, right? It's about being right. It's not about what's right for the relationship. So those of you who are the better arguers, you need to understand this is a big deal. This is really serious. Now, as I was prepping this message, I kept coming across all these great quotes from, again, Dale Carnegie. So I'll show you a bunch of them, because he has, if you've ever taken Dale Carnegie's course, he's got a course, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He talks a lot about arguing. He says, you can't win an argument. You can't, because if you lose it, you lose it. And if you win it, you lose it. Some of you know what that means. You've won arguments and damaged the relationship, which is what he goes on to say. If you argue and rankle, isn't rankle a good word? We should put rankle back in our vocabulary. If you argue and rankle and contradict, you may achieve a victory sometimes, but it'll be an empty victory because you will never get your opponent's goodwill. In other words, you won the battle and lost the war or lost the relationship or lost the opportunity to influence this person ever again. How stupid is that? We are foolish because we don't add humility to what we say. And when you get into arguments, you've crossed the line. So his principle that he teaches in his course, the only way to get the best of an argument is avoid it. So you're like, well, what do you do then when you both disagree? The best argument is that which seems merely like an explanation. You have conversations, not arguments. Now, what's so fascinating about this is that so many of his principles that he taught in his courses are taken directly from the Bible. One of the things that I have never taught on in all the years of teaching is this subject. And when I started prepping this message, I'm like, I got to do a whole message on this. But today I'm not. I'm just doing a point. So I didn't want to write two messages today. So Here's what the New Testament says. Again, I say, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. By the way, do you have a lot of conflict in any relationship? Is there any relationship that you're in today where you have a lot of conflict? Then conversations have probably started to become arguments. When you have a lot of conflict in a relationship, examine this to see if you haven't stopped having conversations and turning them into arguments. And there's a pride that drives that. You want to be right, you want to win, and it's destructive to the relationship. Romans 14:1, accept other believers who are weak in the faith and don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong. That verse, it's just like, can't we just put that on the inside of every church building in America? Can't we just put that one up? Because churches are known as places of conflict, right? Churches split constantly, so destructive. There's constant conflict. They argue about everything, the color of the carpeting. You know, what wattage the light bulb should be. Who cares? Where does it happen? We got electricity. But we argue and fight about everything. And here's this command in the Bible, hey, don't argue about them. Don't argue about that stuff. You can have conversations, but once it starts getting to that point where it's going to turn into argument, you're done. Don't argue with them about what's right and wrong. This is such a common thing. Do everything. Just in case we didn't get it to there, God throws this verse in. Do everything. No complaining and no arguing. How good are you at that? Some of you love arguments, so this is like, oh, Brian, this is getting real personal. I'm sorry. This is important. And so part of all this is learning how to speak your ideas and your thoughts with genuine humility when you disagree. So here's how to do this. You pay attention to what this man did. So if you got a $100 bill in your wallet, good for you. His name is Ben Franklin, and he's on that $100 bill. So one of the greatest founding fathers in our history. He was a diplomat. He negotiated the peace treaty after the Revolutionary War. His word. We don't have politicians like this anymore, unfortunately. But he had the ability to stand in the middle of two opposing sides and bring incredible peace. Can't we just have one Ben Franklin today? Just one. We don't have him. But you want to know what the secret to his success was? He wrote about it. It's actually in that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You want to know why I'm such a big proponent of this book? Here's what the story goes. When Ben Franklin was a young boy, he was arrogant and proud. Matter of fact, one day, one of his older Christian friends pulled him aside because he couldn't take it anymore. And his friend said to him, Ben, you are impossible. Your opinions have a slap in them for everyone who differs with you. They've become so offensive, nobody cares for them. Your friends find they enjoy themselves better when you're not around. By the way, if your friends don't want to be around you, that's a bad sign. Something's wrong. You know so much that no man can tell you anything. Indeed, no man's going to try, for the effort would lead only to discomfort and hard work, so you're not likely ever to know any more than you do now, which is very little. Have a good day. Right? It's like, can you imagine someone saying that to you? They said it to this man, one of the greatest statesmen in the history of our country. Now, most of us, if somebody said something like that to us, we'd be like, put up your dukes. We are going to war right now. We'd be angry and defensive, and we would fight and prove to them why they're wrong, right? But he had that humility muscle I talked about, which had the ability to say, hey, what if they're right and I'm wrong? And as he thought about the words of his friend, he was so caught by the realization that that guy was right that he changed his whole life. He changed the way he spoke. This means so much to me because when I read that story the first time, I could picture some of the people in my life saying those same words to me. If you think I'm arrogant now, you should have seen me back then. If you think I'm proud now, you should have seen me back then. So he made 2 changes to his life. This is what I want you to see. He eliminated words that indicated a fixed opinion. It's certainly this way. It's absolutely this way. He eliminated all of those ly words. And he replaced them with, well, I think it's this way, or I imagine it to be this way, or it appears to me at present. So there's humility in what he was saying when he was sharing his opinions. I think it's this way, but I could be wrong. He added humility to the way he spoke. But that wasn't the only thing he did. When people were wrong around him, he wouldn't directly contradict them. So even if he knew that they were wrong, he wouldn't say, and how many of you have heard this? Many of you heard this last week. That's not true. That's not the way that is. He would never say that. Instead, with humility, he would say, well, in certain cases or circumstances, I think that's correct, but there appear to be some differences here. Do you hear the humility? Do you hear the difference between the two? Which one are you going to respond better to? I mean, all of us are going to respond better to that second one, the one with humility. Now, he said the result of changing his language for 50 years, he said in 50 years, he never made a mistake in this. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been working on this for 20 years, and I make mistakes every week. But if you can add more humility to what you're saying, here's what he said were the positives. Conversations, even about difficult topics, were pleasant. Have you had a conversation about a difficult topic that was pleasant? Maybe what's missing is humility in the way you say it. Maybe it's not wrong what you're saying. It's just that the way you say it is putting the person on defensive. He said the second benefit was his humility in sharing his ideas allowed people to consider them rather than just reject them. Because isn't it true there are people in your life, people in your circle right now that disagree with you? And it turns to arguments. And again, it's not wrong that you have your opinion. It's the way you share it that causes the conflict. And when he was wrong, he was less embarrassed because he hadn't been dogmatic about it, saying, I know this is true. Oh, sorry, it wasn't true. He didn't say that. He said, well, I think it might be this way. Oh, nope, you're right. You were right all along. There's less embarrassment because he wasn't dogmatic about his opinions. Do you hear the difference? Adding humility to what he said transformed his relationships. Here's what he said. He said, I think when he was trying to, at the end of his life, describe how he'd had such a great impact on this world, he said, it all came from this. He said, I earned so much influence with my fellow citizens because of the way he spoke to them with genuine humility. Because you could talk to him about anything. Can people talk to you about anything? Is there genuine humility? I could not be more passionate about a subject than I'm about humility. Because I've seen what happens in my life and my relationships and the people around me when my pride steps up. People get hurt. And what I've learned in my life, if you will pursue humility, do you know you'll have a stronger relationship with God? Do you know that God actually says, I oppose the proud, but I will give grace to the humble. Some of you have no connection with God. You pray to him, doesn't seem like it does anything, bounces off the walls, you read your Bible, you don't get anything out of it. Maybe this is the deal. Maybe you need to start praying a prayer that I've been praying for probably 30 years now. God, would you please humble me? Because he opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. You'll have less conflict in your relationships. Would you like less conflict in your relationships? Anyone want that? Yeah, that's a nice thing. Humility does that. And not only that, when you do have conflict, it'll end quicker. And then your conflict will have a positive impact on the relationships. It'll drive you closer, not further away because of that humility. You'll build great friendships. Do you want more friends? Do you want those friendships to be deeper and stronger? Humility creates that because people want to be around humble friends. Nobody wants to be friends with an arrogant person. What's the point? You gain, and most importantly, you gain influence and help the people around you make better decisions. Some of you, that's the one that makes your heart hurt a little bit today because you're watching people you love today make decisions that you know are going to cost them dearly. And you've tried arguing, and you've tried sharing your opinions, but there's been no humility to it. And it would be humility that will allow people to listen to you. I'm really passionate about this subject. I have been arrogant. I have been proud. I know the cost to this. I know that humility is powerful, and I know it because, again, Jesus modeled it. Jesus didn't come just to wash his disciples' feet. The Bible says he came 2,000 years ago to die on a cross for all of us. Remember I said at the beginning, humility is power used to serve others? That's what Christianity is about. The perfect Son of God entered into this world and then laid down on a cross to take for all of us the punishment we deserve for what we've done that's wrong in our lives. Power used to serve all of humanity. Jesus died for us and then rose again, proving he could forgive anyone. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. Maybe for you the next step is that prayer. And I know it's a little bit scary for some of you, like praying and asking God to humble you. That conjures up ideas in your head of horrible things happening to you. I know it's a little scary, but I'm telling you, you can trust him. And your pride is costing you anyway. You might as well ask for it. Some of you, the best thing you can pray today is, God, I'm asking you to humble me today. For others of you, spiritually, God feels distant. And it feels like there's a separation. Our God came to bridge the gap. Jesus came into this world to die on a cross to bridge that gap so you never have to feel that again. Matter of fact, one of the promises in the New Testament he made was that if you'll put your trust in him, he will come and make his home inside of you. He will not be far away. He'll be inside if you'll let him. With your head bowed and your eyes closed, you can say something like this in your heart if you want that relationship. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. It's amazing that you came and died for me. Please forgive me for what I've done. Come make your home inside of me today. In Jesus' name, amen.